let's talk about not being seen. Aaron Rodgers was not seen at the Jets' mandatory mini camp back in June. And to say that created a kerfuffle is an understatement.
I like that word.
A kerfuffle. Much to do. A big stink. A lot going on. A lot of screaming headlines in New York City. The guy who said anything that has nothing to do with winning, all that BS needs to be out of the building. And he's not in the building when it's mandatory for him to be there. Even though he'd been to pretty much, not virtually, he had been to everything else when it wasn't mandatory. And Robert Saleh called his absence unexcused, which is what raised this to the level of being discussed. And we were wondering when we would hear from him to explain, if asked, where he was and why he wasn't there and what does he think of the coach calling something unexcused. And I thought we would not hear from him until he showed up at the American Century Championship golf tournament in Lake Tahoe a couple of weeks ago. Or was that last week? It was last week, right?
It was last weekend.
Okay. Yeah. 2 weekends ago. They all melded together.
Yeah.
That's right. And so, as a matter of fact, the big news that he said while he was there is he kind of threw an Aaron bomb in the direction of Las Vegas, talking about how he can't wait to play with, he'd love to play with Devontae Adams again, or he can't wait, or whatever. And I was like, does that mean he really wants to be traded from,
or was he just talking about golf?
Vegas? And no, I don't think he's talking about golf. And then receiver came out, and he not on the proverbial Christmas card list of the Garoppolo family anymore, if he was anyway.
Aww.
But, his representation came out and said he's a Raider and there's nothing to see here. And in the same way that Brandon Ayuk is going to be a 49er this year, because why would the 49ers trade him away for just draft choices when they have a team to win the Super Bowl this year? The time to trade Brandon Ayuk for draft choices was the night of the first round of the NFL draft in Detroit, that they left with a rookie wide receiver anyway. Although Ricky Pearsall's on a non-football injury list at present. Talked to Mike Florio about all that in hour number 3. But we bring all this up because Rodgers did also mention at the American Century Classic, although it might not have been on camera. I didn't see it. The soundbite where he said, as a matter of fact, all the rumors that where he was at the time is he was in Egypt on a once-in-a-lifetime trip. And we're assuming trip does not just also mean
a trip.
What you and I might call a trip.
Not mentally.
A vacation.
Yeah.
It might have involved, his methodology of expanding his mind and getting his mind straight to try and win a Super Bowl for the New York Jets, as a crying fan that he encountered in Tahoe was begging him to bring. And long story short, though, we hadn't heard from him about the Jet portion of it. Why would you call it an unexcused absence? And we hadn't heard the whole concept of what he thought about the media to-do that came about it. Because to me, that's the only long-lasting issue for this, is the media set-to that occurred. That will happen again later this week when Jets training camp starts Wednesday, and I think he reports tomorrow. And so that will happen. The New York media will have a session with Rodgers, and we'll see if it gets contentious or not. And how Rodgers would handle anybody that is trying to call him out for not being the leader that he voiced when he said everything that has nothing to do with winning needs to get the heck out of the building. And that's my only thing, is that later on this season, that's sort of back and forth with the media now might grind a gear later on the season if things aren't going well. Which, if you take a look at the Jets' schedule, there's a possibility of it. Rodgers appeared on Pardon My Take. I guess he sat with PFT and Big Cat.
While they were in Tahoe.
In Tahoe.
Yeah.
And they posted it today. This was the exchange that's making news about Rodgers not showing up for a mini camp that's mandatory.
When I was in the NFC North and playing for that team years ago, there used to be a real thing called mini camp where it was you had one of them usually. Sometimes it was right after the draft, but either way, it was 5 practices in 3 days: Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So 2 practices on Friday, 2 on Saturday, 1 on Sunday. Now it's not mini camp. They can arbitrarily put a tag on whatever week of OTAs they want to say this is the mini camp week, which makes it somehow more mandatory than the other weeks. But it was an OTA schedule. That's how it's, how words can be a little deceiving from time to time. You can make a story out of the fact that I missed a mini camp when it was really 2 OTA days.
Right.
Interesting.
I came to the first 10.
So this is a media thing.
And Rodgers, for the radio audience, sort of just extended his arms like a media thing. And
he's not entirely wrong.
by the way, I don't think what he said is wrong or factually incorrect at all about the way things go. And that's why I always wondered if the Jets knew that he had an experience in Egypt that was for that week, for as long as Rodgers had previously said they had known or was reported for the Jets to have known, then just tag the previous week where Rodgers was going to be there as the mandatory week and let the final 2 days of minicamp, which he points out is still like a laid-back version of minicamp, organized team activities, then let that be the days where he can go off to Egypt. And if he's not there, then there's no worse to wear. But if he is saying, I need to take a trip to Egypt to get my mind right, or this is something that I've, when I was recovering from my Achilles surgery, I saw that it was happening in that month of June, and I booked it right then and there to make sure I could get a spot. And that's why I want to go on this, to get my mind right. Then, and the Jets either didn't want to or couldn't or whatever move the mandatory tag to off of that week, then I also understand why Robert Saleh's got to come out and say this is unexcused, because how many other players are going to maybe say, I'm doing something for myself here, and it's been in months in advance.
The whole thing is weird.
Well, it's weird because it was avoidable.
Right. They made so many concessions for this guy.
Avoidable.
So, just what's one more to avoid everybody's save a little face?
Right. Like, this would have been a much smaller version of what the Lakers did by potentially drafting Bronny for LeBron. Yeah. You're helping make employee number 1 a lot happier in his dotage years in the remaining window of chance for you and the franchise to win it all together.
Weird. So avoidable.
But, they could have also said a week before, like, hey, next week's mandatory, but Rodgers won't be here. He's doing his thing. And then a bunch of other players are like, yeah, we don't need him here anyway. We're good. Tyrod needed to get his reps. Remember, they didn't tell Tyrod Taylor he's getting the reps with the ones until that day. Yeah. It just was so weird.
Well, what would you put the chances at that this was just like a Salah power play or something?
Oh, 0.
Hey, 12's not running the organization.
What's the power play? No, first of all, he's 8 now. But yes, I understand what you're saying, dude. The eggs are completely in the Rodgers basket.
But there's
entirely in the Rodgers basket.
League-wide, assumption that Rodgers is running the whole organization.
Well, and maybe he is, and there's a reason why. Because they put all their eggs in Aaron Rodgers' basket. And the only difference between this year and last year is they have a much better backup plan if the basket blows a gasket. Tyrod Taylor can get them some victories that I don't think Zach Wilson was equipped to get them last year. Can he get him to the Super Bowl? I mean, that would be a story of the century. But I mean, I'm sure Jet fans don't want to talk about that right now. You know what I mean? Like, again, to me, end of the day, when we had Aiden Hutchinson on in hour one, we were talking about the first Sunday night of the season. Lions, Rams. A day after, Texas at Michigan. Longhorns v. Wolverines. What a weekend that's going to be. The football weekend ends that Monday night with the Jets in San Francisco. And when Rodgers is, hopefully for him, healthy and in that tunnel in his native Northern California, is he going to be sitting here thinking, man, I can't believe they said it was an unexcused absence in June? Of course not. He's going to be fired up, as will the Jets, as will that crowd, as will the Niners faithful. You know, I mean, it's going to be lit. That's why they're putting the game on Monday night again on ABC. And, you know, and you could call the rest of that first month of the season soft on the schedule, although you know how I feel about Tennessee. At Tennessee, that's a short week. Coming back from the West Coast, they're going to have to get to Tennessee for that game. It's the Titans home opener. That's not going to be a gimme. Then there's the Patriots short week right after that with Denver. Listen, bottom line is throughout that first game going into San Francisco, will that matter? Of course not. But what might matter is the back and forth with the media right now, because, you know, New York media, Rodgers essentially didn't really have to deal with them last year. He was going to the Tony Awards, and Hard Knocks was a big kiss on the cheek, and then poof, his value proven by the Jets' disastrous season. Now this is the first sideways moment. The question is, how does it spin when they chat this week, and how does that set the stage for New York media that might be ready to pounce if that first month of the season winds up 2-2, 1-3, before they go to London to take on Minnesota on NFL Network, where they might see Sam Darnold again. How about that? That's the question. But hearing today, he's right. I mean, the dude was there for everything else, and why didn't the Jets just flip what was mandatory? I don't know. I don't know. We'll probably never know, because this won't be a story in week one. I'll tell you that. Not for that Monday night. Can you imagine Rodgers right before the game? Hey, Aaron, what's going through your head? Well,
yeah, jeez.
That June thing when I was in Egypt, I had to hear about this when I came off the ayahuasca.
Unexcused.
All those messages on my phone. No. Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.